Good morning, everyone. Welcome to another session of the Network Seminar Series hosted by the Center for Network Intelligence at the ECE and RBCC PSIAC. Today's talk is by Dr. Teja Peddinti, and he will be speaking on a large scale study of user behavior, expectations, and engagement with Android permissions. Dr. Teja is a staff research scientist in the Privacy Research Group at Google. He finished his bachelor's in Information and Communication Technology with a gold medal from DAIICT India in 2009 and then completed his PhD in computer science at the New York University School of Engineering in 2014. His primary research focus is on applying machine learning techniques to build novel privacy and security features and in performing large scale measurements and analysis to understand user preferences or concerns and to evaluate effectiveness of existing offerings. His research appeared at many top tier conferences and won the IAPP SOUPS Privacy Award in 2017 and was a finalist in the NYU CSAW Applied Research Competition in 2022. Before we move on to the talk, we would like to request the online audience to subscribe to our Google group for information on our future talks. You can also visit our website for more details. I'll be pasting the links in the chat box. Please do check. Finally, we request the audience to keep your microphones on silent for the duration of the talk, except when asking questions. For questions, feel free to unmute yourself and ask directly, or type them in the chat box. We'll relay your questions. Over to you, Dr. Sai.
Thank you, Ankita. I'm glad that I'm able to present at ISS seminar series. Thanks for giving me this opportunity. I understand that this is not the ideal time for this regular seminar series, and thanks for accommodating my different time zone requests. Okay, let
Thank
me
you.
share my screen. Okay. Can you all see my talk, or can you all see my slides?
Yes,
Okay.
it's not full screen yet.
Yeah. Is it better?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So today I'll be talking about a large-scale study of user behavior expectations and engagement with Android permissions. This work was published at USENIX Security conference in 2021. It's a joint work with my fellow researchers at University of Toronto and at Google. Feel free to stop me during the talk too. I would like to keep it an interactive discussion. So I'm sure many of you own smartphones and you regularly interact with applications on a day-to-day basis. Often, these smartphone operating systems provide you in a key mechanism for users to control how they share their private data and whom they share it with. This is called as a permission management system. Um, in our research, we specifically focus on the Android permission system, but even Apple's iOS operating system also has very similar controls. So whatever research we have done here could also be replicated with Apple's iOS very easily. Specifically in the Android permission system, we have two different ways in which users can grant or deny permissions for different applications. The first one is the runtime permission prompt, which is the first figure here. Let's say, for example, you're using Facebook, and then Facebook wants to show you some specific functionality or show you friends who are nearby, then they might ask you to grant location permission for the app. So here, when you see the prompt, you have two options. Either you can allow the permission request and also deny it. So this prompt is called as a runtime permission request prompt. This occurs when you're actively using the app. On the other hand, you can also go to the settings menu and also grant or deny permissions to an application. Either you could do it from the app's own permission page, or you can also go to the permissions list and see which all apps have access to the specific permission that you have selected. So the second and the third screens are specifically the Android settings menu that you're seeing here. So there are many factors that might affect a user's decision to grant or deny a permission. The first thing is it depends on what kind of functionalities they are providing. But apart from that, the main factor could be what expectations does the user have with respect to the app in terms of what functionality that it offers and what does the user actually use the app for. On the other hand, there are also these explanations that the app might be providing to the user, saying, okay, they use this permission for so and so need. So this knowledge is also helpful for the user to understand why an app is requesting a permission. In addition to that, each user, they have their own privacy sensitivities, they have their own privacy attitudes. They also impact if a user would grant or deny a particular permission. Say, for example, if I'm very sensitive to apps accessing my location information, then I might try to deny the location permission to these apps more frequently. So each user would have their own preferences, and these attitudes also come into play. And lastly, the demographics of the user would also come into picture. People who are young, they have different characteristics compared to people who are old. So all of these are some of the well-known factors that might be impacting how a user might grant or deny permission on a particular smartphone or their device. Prior research work has focused on just one or a few of these factors. They try to look at the interaction between these few factors, but they haven't looked at all four together. Our goal is to study all of these factors and the interplay between them. And specifically, we want to study the effect of one factor while controlling for the others. So, what does that mean? Well, we want to identify what is the impact of expectation alone, and also expectation in the presence of when app is providing an explanation, and depending on the user's attitudes and also the user's demographics. So we want to control for all the other factors and then evaluate the effect of one factor separately. But when we want to do a research study with the goal of this type, there are definitely going to be certain challenges. Specifically, there are two key challenges in our research. The first one is we need to be able to collect different types of data from the same individuals. Like, we need to observe how a user is granting or denying permissions on their device, and also survey them so that we can capture their own attitudes and expectations. So we need both the survey data and also the behavioral data from the same individuals during the study. And the second challenge is we need to be able to collect data from a large pool of participants, ideally from many different countries, so that we can have a good sample of user distribution across different countries, and then we can do the cross-country analysis too. And doing that without meeting them in person is really going to be very tough. So the methodology that we employ is called experience sampling methodology, where we try to survey participants right at the moment that they make a particular choice. Ideally, when you do a regular survey study, you might ask users to think about the last time that they did something, and then based upon that, you might ask them some questions. But often, what happens is if the last time that they have chosen something is very old, or let's say a few months ago, then user might not remember all the things that have contributed to they making a particular choice. So they might forget the details, or they might not actively reflect what thought they had in mind at that time when they made that particular decision. So the key thing is we need to be able to survey participants right when they made the choice, so that their reasons are fresh in their mind. And in order to be able to conduct this study, we created something called as a study instrument, or a separate application called PrivaDroid. And this application will be used in the wild to collect behavioral data from actual users. So we asked participants to install this PrivaDroid application on their own personal phones, and we let it run in the background for a period of 30 days. And during this time period, the app observes specific events that are happening on the user's device. For example, the app installation events that have occurred, or the permission grant or deny decisions that have been happening from the runtime prompt, or also from the settings menu. And whenever these specific interesting events are occurring, we launch an in-situation survey right at that moment to ask users specific questions related to the event that has happened on their device. Let me give you an example. Let's say the user is using Facebook and they have denied location permission to the Facebook app. So immediately, Pivot Road application will show them a notifications saying that the survey is available. And when the user clicks on that survey, they'll be asked why did they deny the location permission to the Facebook app. And when they click on that particular question, they'll be given a set of options, and they can select one or more that might apply to their own case. Say, for example, they think the app shouldn't be needing this permission, which is the first option, or they don't trust the developer, which is one of the other options. If you notice carefully, we also have something called as the other option, where when a user selects that, they'll be given a text box so that they can type a free form textual response to. So this will cover for cases where we haven't enumerated all the various options, or all the various reasons in which users can uh, sorry, all the various options in which users might have made a particular choice for the application. I would like to point out that these reasons were all derived from a prior study that we did back in 2017. So that study was also very similar. It was done using a different tool, but it was a US only study with just 150 participants. And because we are trying to replicate the study, we want to be able to compare how things have changed over the 4-year term since the first study was done. So we try to replicate the same reasons as in the earlier study, so that we can do a apples to apples comparison. In addition, we also have a couple of other questions in the survey that we show the user, so that we can capture what their expectations are and so forth. Any questions so far? Okay, let me move on then. So we published the Prividor application on the Google Play Store, and it was live until the year 2020. We supported all major Android versions from, say, 6.0, that was when the runtime permissions were launched, to version 10, which is the active version at that time. And we also translated our application into 4 different popular languages. Specifically, the app text and the survey questions were translated into Spanish, French, and also Chinese. So in total, we supported 4 languages, including English. And then our study had 3 different surveys that we asked our participants to answer. The first one is a demographic survey that they had to answer as soon as they joined our experiment, where we asked what their gender is, what their age is, and their education level, and also the country that they come from. Um, and during the 30 period study, we also have many in-situation surveys that get asked right when the user installs an application or when a permission decision event happens on their personal device. So these in-situational surveys essentially capture participants' decision rationales, which is essentially why they have made a particular choice, and also their expectations in terms of how an app should behave and were they surprised by that or not, and also their comfort level when they were granting and denying the permissions. In order to not overload the participants with too many in-situation surveys, we have a 5-minute cooldown period between the various surveys that we show the user. Let's say, for instance, the user has immediately within a span of 2 minutes installed 2 applications. We'll only show an installation survey just for one of those applications, most likely the first one that have occurred. We specifically did not want to overload the user by showing them too many surveys. And later on, at the end of the 30-day period, finally, we have something called as the exit survey. If you remember, one of the things that we want to capture is users' attitudes with respect to privacy. So for this, we asked them to answer a well-known privacy scale called IUIPC, which is Internet Users Information Privacy Consent Scale. This specific survey was designed for Internet in general. So we adopted that survey and updated it to be more specific to mobile privacy. Specifically, this scale has 4 different sections. The first one is about control, which is about data control. The second one is about data awareness. Third is about collection, and the fourth is about the secondary use of data. Each of these sections again have multiple questions where the question could be answered on a scale of strongly disagree to strongly agree. We converted those responses to numbers mapped between -2 and +2. And these numbers can be used to help us calculate the privacy scores across the 4 different dimensions that the scale currently supports. So just to reiterate, so the scale gives us 4 different sections. Each section has multiple questions. The question responses could be converted to a numeric scale, and then based on that, we get a privacy score of the user across these 4 dimensions. So these are all the 3 different survey sections that we have. One at the joining of the experiment, a couple of in-situation surveys when we actually conduct the study, and finally at the end, we have this exit survey. So how did we recruit the participants? We had a couple of criteria. We wanted to recruit participants broadly across the world, across many different countries. And there is no easy way for us to recruit participants. So we decided to rely on mobile advertisements. So we had crafted our own ad saying, okay, this is what was shown to the user. You can become a participant by installing an Android application, stay for 30 days, and you'll get $10 reward for participating in the study. And we specifically included that this experiment was sponsored by the University of Toronto, so as to ensure participants that this is not a fake ad or a spammy ad. It's actually a study that is conducted by a university. And this ad was shown across multiple ad platforms. We had Google Ads, Facebook Ads, and also the Reddit platform. And users who saw the ad and clicked on it, they were redirected to the Google Play Store, specifically the application page within the Google Play Store. And the description of the app says that, okay, this is a study to learn about users' preferences when they are making permission choices on their device. And then we also show them certain screenshots. When users are comfortable in participating in the study, they install the application. And the first screen of the app shows that this experiment is entirely voluntary. They can join or exit the experiment at their wish. Participants must have to be at least 18 years or older. And we also tell them what are all the different data fields that we collect, what do we monitor on their device, and what kind of survey questions they have to answer. And only when the user is comfortable with all of the data that we collect, they have to agree to the terms, and only then they'll be able to join the experiment. Okay, let me give you a summary of the study that we have conducted. So the study ran from November of 2019 to May of 2020. Each participant was in the study for a period of total 30 days. So only when they have been in the study for the 30-day period, then they will be compensated for participation in the study. So the compensation, as I said earlier, was $10 if they stayed for the entire 30-day period and answered all the survey questions. So we recruited participants from 10 different countries or regions. They're Canada, United States, Argentina, United Kingdom, France, Spain, South Africa, India, Singapore, and Hong Kong. We had a diverse criteria for choosing these countries. The first one was we wanted to have representation across 5 different continents. The second one was we wanted to have a good split between developing and developed economies. So that's why we had India and South Africa in the mix. We also wanted to have coverage of user base in these countries that speak the 4 languages that our app is available in, specifically English, Spanish, French, and Chinese. And we also try to pick countries that have good smartphone penetration. As you're all very aware, India has really high smartphone penetration. Same is the case with some of these other developed countries like US and France. And lastly, we also try to pick countries that have very different and diverse privacy laws or privacy views. Specifically, countries in the Europe area, they have this GDPR and some of these other privacy regulations. So we wanted to have a good mix of countries where there is an existing well-known privacy regulation and where there isn't. So these were all the various reasons that factored in our choice of these countries and regions. And because this was the first study that was using mobile advertising to recruit participants for a user study, we also indicate how much money we had to spend to recruit participants for the survey. In total, over the span of 7 months, we had to spend almost like 13,000 US dollars just for showing the ads and then getting installations for the app. In total, during the period of 7 months, we had like about 5,400 installations for the Privadroid application. But of these 5,400 installs, only 1,720 or 1,719 participants stayed for the required 30-day period and completed the study. So I'll be showing the data from just these 1,719 participants. So from these participants, in total, we saw about 72,000 app installation events. And because we don't survey the user for all the events that happened on the device, we only surveyed 36% of these app install events. And in terms of permission decision events, we have seen nearly 36,000 of these events across all the users, of which we surveyed 30%. Before I dive into the details, any questions so far? Okay, let me move on. So what are all the data that we collect in our study? As I said, the first initial survey is taken when the user actually joins the experiment. At this point, we collect the demographics, which specifically the gender, age, education, and the country or the region that they are coming from. And during the course of the study of the 30-day period for each participant, we collect their behavior in terms of what apps were installed, what permissions were granted or denied across various apps on their device. So this is essentially the user behavior characteristics that we capture. And for these permission related events, we also capture two different types of data. The first one is users' expectations in terms of whether they expected the permission request from the app or not, and few related questions related to that. And we also ask users rationales behind the decisions that they have made in terms of why did the participant grant or deny particular permission to an app. Um, as I said earlier, the rationales were all derived from an earlier study back in 2014. So we tried to, wherever possible, we tried to compare our results with the earliest study that was done in 2017. In addition to these expectations and rationales, we also try to capture some of the app explanations that the apps provide as pre-prompts for the permission request. This is to see if these explanations have any influence on users' permission grant or deny decisions. And lastly, we at the end of the survey, we capture users' privacy sensitivities based on the modified IUIPC scale across the 4 dimensions that it supports. So these were all the different data fields that we collect. And then now I'll be diving into the details about by correlating all the various data that we collect across all the different surveys. So let's dive into the permission data. Of the 36,000 permission decision events that we have seen, 30% of them have been surveyed. But across the 36,000 permission decision events, we see that the average permission deny rate was nearly 16%. But this deny rate was varying a lot based on the type of permission. As you see in the picture on the right, if you see microphone, it is the topmost denied permission with nearly 30% of the requests being denied, followed by calendar, which has 25% denial rate, and then contacts, which has 19% denial rate. On the other extreme, we have call logs, which is very rarely denied. The denial rate is just 9%. So with this, we see this wide variability in the denial rates based on the type of permission. But on average, across all the permission types, the denial rate is 16.7%. Compared to the study that was conducted in 2017 and only in the US, the denial rate hasn't changed much. This shows that probably user denial, permission denial characteristics haven't changed that significantly, even though it's been 4 years. Of these 36,000 permission decision events, we have noticed that 8% of these decision events happen from the settings menu. So the majority of the permission decision events have been happening from the runtime prompt that the app surface when the user is using the app. When we look at the top reasons as to why users deny permissions to an app, we see that users say that they can always grant the permission afterwards if they change their mind. So they know that, so they are aware where the permission controls are on their device or in the operating system, so they can go back and alter their decision if they need. The second reason says that they do not use a specific feature associated with the permission. This shows that users have a really strong notion of the permission type that is being requested and the specific functionality that they want to use the app for. And only when there is an alignment, they are trying to grant the permission. Otherwise, they are not granting the permission to the app. The third reason says that I think the app shouldn't need this permission. So they are penalizing the apps if they feel that the app is encroaching on their privacy and then requesting more permissions than is actually needed. All these reasons show that users are doing this privacy versus utility trade-offs when they decide which permissions to grant to an app and which to withhold. Okay. Let's move on and look at the explanation strings. As I was saying earlier, some apps do show a pop-up dialog box and explain why they want to ask a particular permission, and then they show the permission prompt. To give you an example, let's look at Facebook. Let's say you're using Facebook and you try to search for, say, some good restaurants nearby or friends nearby within the application, or you want to buy something on the Facebook marketplace, and then Facebook might ask you to access your location. So, but before it actually shows you the runtime prompt, it will show you a dialog box asking, it wants to use your location to show you relevant and personalized experience, and would like to help you check in and find local events and to serve you better ads. So they're giving you this explanation string as to why they will be why they're requesting the location permission. And for this particular dialog, you see two buttons. One is to allow and the other is to deny. Only when you click the allow button, that's when the actual system's permission request prompt is shown to the user, and the user can grant or deny the permission to the app at that point. And because this explanation is there, it's also helping the user understand why the permission is being requested. We wanted to evaluate what influence do these explanation strings have in the user's choice of granting or denying the permission. In order to capture these explanation prompts, what we have done is we tried to capture all the text views in our PrivateDroid application that precede a particular permission prompt. And we use certain heuristics to decide if the text view contains this permission explanation string. So the heuristics include the string that is shown to the user should contain a keyword about some data collection, say access, collect, etc. And the keyword, there should also be a keyword about the specific permission or the resource type that is being requested. Say, for example, cameras or photos or something. If you look at the Facebook example here, it is specifically asking about accessing, which is about data collection. It's also talking about the location permission specifically. And so this passes our heuristic. We acknowledge that our heuristic is very conservative. So what all permission explanation strings that we capture, they are going to be an underestimate of all possible explanation strings that are out there in the wild. But still, we were able to capture a sizable number of these permission explanation strings. And what we have seen is when these explanation strings are shown to the user, the denied rate drops significantly for the permission. They go down to 7.1% in cases when the explanation is shown, compared to the case of 15.4% of denial rate when there is no explanation string. So this shows that explanations are indeed having an impact in educating the user and also getting more grants from the user. In order to validate if this finding statistically holds, what we did was we conducted something called as a mixed effect logistic regression modeling, where we showed the explanation string as an independent variable, the presence of explanation string as an independent variable, and whether the user granted or denied the permission as the response variable, and we tried to model it. And we were able to find statistical correlation there. So where we can confidently say that, okay, explanation strings do indeed influence the user's choice in granting or denying a permission. Later on, we also try to evaluate the impact of the explanation string along with other factors that are also there, but I'll talk about that at a later point. Any questions so far? Okay, let me
No,
move
there are
on.
no questions. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. So the next aspect is the user's expectation. So we measure users' expectations at 2 points in the study. The first one is at install time, when they actually install the application, and then later on at runtime, when the user is interacting with the app and the app shows a permission prompt. So here's what they look like. Let's say the user went to the Google Play Store, they installed Facebook. Right at that point, they'll be shown a survey as to why did they install Facebook, and we'll also ask them, what all permissions do you think Facebook would be requesting you, and then we'll get their expectation at that point. In the case of runtime permission, let's say the user has granted or denied the permission for the app. At that point, we say we again pop up a survey which is very specific to what action they have taken. As shown in the notification here, we ask them, why did you deny storage permission to the Facebook app? And when the user clicks, we'll again ask for, did they actually expect Facebook to request the storage permission or not? So these are the 2 points at which we measure users' expectation. And what we see is, in cases when the user did not expect the permission, the deny rates are much higher. Those are indicated by the brown bars in the figure here. For all permission types, irrespective of the type of permission, you see that the brown bars are all higher than the blue bars, where the blue bars indicate if the user correctly expected the app requesting that permission at install time or not. Specifically in terms of numbers, the average unexpected request deny rate is 14.2%, whereas for the expected request deny rate, goes down to 10.2%. Again, to validate if
One
this
question.
statistical,
Yeah,
yes.
how do you calculate this expected request deny rate?
So if you go back here, here during the installation time, we ask user to pick all permissions that they think that the app might request. Let's say for the Facebook case, user expects that, okay, it might request my location, it might request my camera permission. Let's say they only expected those two. Later on, when the app actually asks for the camera permission or for the location permission, we know that the user has expected those two permissions. So they will be counted towards a camera and location will be counted towards the blue bars in that situation. Let's say the user did not expect microphone, but Facebook still asks for them. In that case, microphone would be counted towards the unexpected for that particular user. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah, yeah. Got it. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. So in order to validate if this difference is statistically significant, we again rely on mixed effect logistic regression modeling, where we show the expectation at install time and then try to model the user's granting and denying decision. And then based on that, we're able to see that in cases when it is unexpected, it is statistically significant that the permission would be denied at a higher rate compared to the case when it is expected. And this condition holds true even when we are controlling for other factors like explanations, the app routing explanations, and so forth. In the case of runtime expectations setup, the difference between expected and unexpected case is much more prominent. You see here in the picture that all the blue bars are much taller compared to all the brown bars are much taller compared to the blue bars. In fact, when we look at the average value for the expected request, the deny rate is just 12%. And for the unexpected request, it goes beyond double, which is like 26.9%. Similarly, we did the mixed effects logistic regression modeling, and then we were able to see statistical significance even in this case. Okay, so this shows that when both the install time and the runtime expectations indicate that when user expects that an app requests a particular permission, it's highly likely that the permission would be granted. In other cases, it's more likely that the user would deny the permission. So there is a need for the app developers to set appropriate expectations and let the user know what permissions they might need request. Moving on, we next did cross-country analysis to understand whether the country that the user is coming from or the region that they're coming from has any influence in their permission grant or denial characteristics. I would like to acknowledge that this is very challenging to do in practice because there are many reasons behind why a user might behave in a particular way. It could be because of the privacy attitudes of people in that country. It could be because of cultural differences. It could be because of the privacy or other regulatory frameworks that are there in the country, and so on and so forth. It is impossible for us to measure all of these, but the data that we have is observations from our participants in terms of how they have granted or denied their permissions for apps during the study period. So we leverage just that permission denial related information and then do one analysis where we try to compare every pair of countries, and then we see if their denial rate distributions are very different or similar. In other words, we try to see if participants from these two countries are being pulled out from the same denial rate distributions. So we did pairwise ANOVA tests across all pairs of countries, and then we tried to see if their denial rate distributions are same or different. Based on that, we were able to identify two different cliques of countries, where each clique exhibited very similar characteristics. In other words, participants from the same clique are statistically drawn, seem to be drawn from the populations with the same mean denial rates. So the first clique is US, India, and South Africa. All of these countries tend to have an average denial rate of about 13%. And the second click is Canada, Spain, Argentina, and France. They tend to have an average denial rate of roughly 21.6%. UK or Great Britain and Singapore, these two countries, they didn't fit very well with any of the existing clicks, so they are on their own. For this particular study, we removed Hong Kong region because we didn't have sufficient number of data points to be able to do the analysis. And based on this, we were able to see that, okay, even though certain countries are not adjacent geographically, they tend to have very similar characteristics in terms of how they behave or how they interact with apps based on the permission denial rates. Okay, so this is another analysis that we did. So through our study period, we collected many different factors or features that might influence a user's permission grant or deny decision. These include privacy sensitivity scores of the user across the 4 dimensions of the modified IUIPC scale, such as control and secondary use. We also have 3 binary features. The first one is whether the app was providing any explanation for the permission before it asked for the permission. The second one is, did the user actually expect the permission at runtime? The third one is whether the permission decision happened from the runtime menu or from the settings menu. These are all the 3 different binary features that we have. We also have 4 different demographic variables. These include the age of the participant, the gender, the education level of the participant, and also the country that they come from. For these demographic variables, generally we have to set something called as a reference variable. For example, when we try to compare countries, we try to set US as the reference level, and compared to US, we can say, okay, certain countries deny or grant more compared to the other ones. So for the demographic variables, we have to set a baseline or a reference variable. And then we also have the permission type, which is camera, location, contacts, and so forth. We included permission type because the type of permission also plays a significant role in the user granting or denying a permission. So we try to include that. On the other hand, because we have many events coming from each participant, and there are also many different decisions that we record for any single app, we try to include them as random effects in the analysis, in the mixed effects logistic regression, so that we try to account for any latent differences that are accounted or coming from the same participant or from the same app. And lastly, our permission decision, which is whether the user has granted or denied the permission, will be represented as a binary response variable that we try to model based on all the 12 different factors that we have seen earlier. So generally, when we do mixed effect logistic regression, we try to ensure that all the factors that we include in the analysis, they don't have any collinearity among them. In other words, let's say if there are 2 variables that are exhibiting very similar characteristics, you don't need to have both the features in the modeling, and having one would be sufficient. So in order to validate if our 12 features have high collinearity, we try to do this variance inflation factors analysis. And this gives us some value. And if the value is less than 5 for each of the factor, then we can be very confident that there is no multicollinearity in the features that we have considered. And that's what happened in our case. So we can include all 12 features in the analysis, and we don't have to remove any of the features during the evaluation. So we looked at 12 input features, 2 random effects, which will be accounted for. And then we have 1 response variable, and we use and perform this logistic regression analysis. So here is how the results look like. Let me walk you through what I'm showing you here. Each row in the table corresponds to one of the variable or the factor that we have considered. Say, for example, collection is one variable. Collection is one of the dimensions for the privacy scores that we have computed. We also include what are the acceptable value ranges for this variable, and what is the coefficient value in the mixed effects logistic regression analysis that we have computed. So this coefficient value can be positive or negative. If it is positive, it means that this particular variable influences the denial rate being higher. And if it is negative, it pulls it in the other direction, indicates that it reduces the denial rate. And lastly, we have this p-values, which indicate the statistical significance in our analysis. We can be only confident about those that have a p-value which is less than 0.05, that is a star or 3-star values. So all the important, or in other words, all the variables that have a lot of influence have been bolded in this figure. In this table, let me walk you through some examples. If you look at this particular explanation variable, it's a binary one. Permission could have an explanation, or it may not have an explanation. And we see that the coefficient value is negative. It means that when an app includes an explanation string, the deny rates are going to be very less for the app. And that's indicated by the negative coefficient, and the p-value is highly significant. Similarly, when we look at countries where our reference country is US, we see that Canada, Argentina, UK, France, and Spain, they all have positive coefficient values, which also have statistical significance. This means that on average, people coming from these 5 countries, they are more likely to deny a permission compared to an average user who might be coming from the US. When we specifically look at countries like South Africa and India, they don't have any statistical significance, so we can't comment strongly on how they are different from the US. We don't see any statistical significance because if earlier I showed that US, South Africa, and India were all in the same clique, so they tend to exhibit very similar characteristics. So we can't say whether people in India are more likely to deny or less likely to deny permissions compared to an average user in the US. So we can't make this statement because we don't have any statistical significance here. Similarly, when we look at permission types, where location is our reference permission, we can see that contacts and microphone, they have statistical significance and they also have positive coefficients. This means that compared to location permission, contacts and microphone are more likely to be denied by users. And on the other hand, storage permission is less likely to be denied because it has a negative coefficient value. So this mixed effect logistic regression tells us that there's actually more than one factor that is influencing a user's decision to grant or deny permission. We see that education plays some role in terms of whether they have a high school or a higher education. We have this privacy attitudes or privacy scores for the user that also seem to have an effect. Whether the decision was happening from the settings menu or not seems to be playing an influence here. We also have gender, which doesn't it shows that females are more likely to deny compared to men. It's probably because of the privacy sensitivities that they have. So there are more than one factor. There is more than one factor that is influencing a user's decision at the end. Any questions so far? Okay, let me move on to the last part of the talk, where we try to compare privacy sensitivities and the deny rates of the participant. If you remember, like for each participant, we compute their privacy scores across 4 dimensions: control, awareness, collection, and secondary use. Now we try to average all of these 4 scores and just get one overall privacy sensitivity score for each participant. And for each participant, we also know what their average deny rate is. And based on that, we know the percentage of denials that the participant has exhibited during our study. And based on that, we can represent each participant as one cell in this grid. And as more participants fall into a particular grid, we try to color the cell appropriately. So if you have a darker color, like at the bottom here for the privacy score of 1, it means that there are at least 20 participants who fall under that, who fall in that cell with a deny rate of close to 0 and a privacy score, overall privacy score of 1.1 or something. Okay. And now that we have this plot, we can make some very interesting observations. The first observation is that as you go towards the right side of this axis, we see that the deny rates are in general increasing. So this is an indication that the higher privacy sensitivity you have, the more likely you are to deny permission for a particular app. The second observation is that as you go towards the right in this plot, the distribution of the cells is also changing. And here towards the right, the variance is a lot higher compared to the variance that we see towards the left of this plot. This shows that as the privacy score is increasing, we see a lot more variance or difference in the permission denying behavior across our participants. And the last and the very interesting characteristic is as we go towards the right side of the overall privacy score, we also see a strong concentration of individuals in the bottom right side of the graph, which is indicated by the darker colored cells. This shows that there are a sizable number of participants who have really low deny rates. even though they have really high privacy sensitivities. Specifically, we see that there are 29% of participants who have really low deny rates of lower than the average value. Generally, there is this well-known concept called as privacy paradox, which says that though some users say that they have high privacy sensitivity, their behaviors don't exhibit that they indeed have that sensitivity. In our case, it could be that those who say they have high sensitivity, they might be still be granting a lot of permissions to the various applications. So initially, it might seem that way, but what we have uncovered is all these users who are at the bottom right, they tend to be very good at expecting what permissions an app might need. And based on our analysis earlier, let me go back a bit. Yes. So if you see the runtime expectation value at the bottom of this table, if the user has not expected the permission, then the coefficient value is much higher. It's 1.2. This shows that when the users have not expected the permission, they are more likely to deny the permission. Now, comparing the case of these participants who are at the bottom right, we saw that these users were very good at expecting what permissions an app needs. And when they expect it correctly, they are more likely to grant the permission. So we call these users as highly engaged users. They're able to have correct expectations for what permissions an app needs, and that's why they're also comfortable granting the permission to the app. So it does not correspond to the privacy paradox that I was saying earlier, but this is just a new set of users who are highly engaged with the apps that they are using. So those are all the observations that we have identified through our research study. But our research study has certain limitations. The first limitation is that we have something called as a selection bias based on how we have recruited participants for our study. The first thing is we have included participants who are very actively interacting with ads. If you remember, we showed ads, and people who clicked on the ads were then recruited in the study. So these users that we have recruited, they are skewed towards those who interact with the advertisements online. And these users were also very comfortable with installing an application that monitors their behaviors and shows them surveys. So it's highly skewed towards that population. And we did not change the financial incentives that we offered to the participants based on which country they come from. This is, for example, $10 in US would have a very different value compared to $10 in India. The monetary value of $10 is very different across different countries. We didn't account for that. So people in certain countries might be more financially motivated to participate in our study compared to people in other countries. The second limitation is that we don't have good visibility into events that happened before the user installed our study application. In other words, let's say the user installed the PrivaDroid application as of, say, March 1st of 2024. All the permission decision events that happened before that date, or all the apps that they've installed on that application, we can't survey the user about those events. So our data collection is highly skewed towards apps that were only observed during the study period, and we don't have a lot of data for most of the pre-installed applications or really popular apps which are installed way before we actually recruited the participants for our study. And the second limitation or the incomplete visibility aspect that we have is, even though we have observed that there are 36,000 permission decision events in our study, the number of data points that we have for each individual app is very less. In fact, the highest number of events that we have seen for one app in our data is just 54. There were just 54 permission events. And because we have very few events for each app, we can't analyze the user behaviors across individual apps. So we can't say how do users generally behave for Facebook compared to, say, WhatsApp, for example. This is one of the limitations of how we collected the data or what data we collected. So those are all the limitations. So now let me wrap up the findings from our research. The first thing is we found out that mobile advertising is very effective in recruiting participants for studies like this. And based on our mixed effect logistic regression analysis, we were able to see that when the app provides a explanation for why it requests the permission, then it is more likely that the user won't deny the permission for the particular app. In fact, the deny rate reduces or drops by half compared to what it was when there is no explanation string. And also, the other observation is in both the install time and runtime expectations case, when the user expects the permission, then they are more likely to grant the permission to the app. And this is true regardless of their demographics or the permission type that is being requested. And lastly, we observe that there are indeed a lot of factors that go into deciding whether the user might grant or deny a particular permission for an app. These factors include the participants' demographics, like their age or gender, the privacy attitudes that they have, which we measure using their privacy scores, the expectations in terms of how they think an app might behave and what permissions it might request, the explanation strings that the app might provide, and also the type of permission. Okay, let me stop there, and I'll be happy to take any questions you have.
Thank you, Dr. Sai, for an informative talk. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I have one. So there is a phenomena where people sometimes ask a proxy to do install apps and all, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they are not technically savvy, or like they're not used to this. So is there a way to identify and maybe like the percentage that could be because of that?
That is really hard to identify because we don't have any visibility into who is the user who's actually taking this action. We hope that because the study was only conducted for a period of 30 days, a thing like that happening could be very less. If you think about something like click farms that people often have to drive the number of installs or submit fake reviews for a particular app, we think that those might not be impacting our study because we require the user to have the app installed on the device for the complete period of 30 days. We ask them to give us accessibility and other permissions for us to monitor what is happening on the device. And then we require them to answer our survey responses. People who participate in these click farms and other things, they don't have a lot of motivation to participate in a study like this. On the other hand, if you consider about the family cases where a kid might be helping the parent manage their phone and other things, um, it those participants could have influenced our study, but it's really hard for us to determine how much impact that would have on the analysis.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question?
Okay, if there are no more questions, we can close this session. Thank you, Dr. Sai, for accepting our
Thank you.
invitation.
Thank you. And thanks for giving me this opportunity to present my research work. Thank you.
Thank you.